Georg Ludwig Ritter von Trapp was born on April 4, 1880 in Zara in the Kingdom of Dalmatia, which was then a crown land of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and which is today the town of Zadar in Croatia. His father, August Johann Trapp, was a military man who became a Fregattenkapitän and thus elevated to the Austrian nobility as a Ritter or Knight, when awarded the Order of the Iron Crown 3rd class. Hence the new family name, von Trapp. Georg was 4 when he acquired the title of von Trapp. At age 14, von Trapp joined the Imperial and Royal Austro-Hungarian Navy when he enrolled at the Naval Academy at Fiume on the Dalmatian coast, which is today Rijeka in Croatia. The Royal Austro-Hungarian Navy was formed in 1867 when Austria and Hungary had joined to become the dual monarchy. Von Trapp then joined the Navy proper at the age of 18 as a cadet 2nd class on July 1, 1898, becoming a cadet 1st class exactly 3 years later. As a cadet, he was assigned to a schooling ship, the corvette SMS Saida II, which had a crew of 42 officers and 313 seamen, and which circumnavigated the world. The impressive wooden sailing ship represented a bygone era and was a major attraction when it docked at foreign ports. Georg's training took him all over the world, from Malta, the Suez, Aden, and Ceylon to Australia and the Marquesas Islands in French Polynesia. Georg von Trapp proved his worth as a naval officer long before the First World War. For example, von Trapp was actively involved in the Boxer Rebellion that raged throughout China in 1899 and 1900. Austria-Hungary formed part of the infamous Eight-Nation Alliance forces that invaded China after the locals had the temerity to rebel against British occupation. Von Trapp was decorated for his brave actions aboard the cruiser SMS Zenta during the assault on the Taku forts in northeastern China. 2 years later, in 1902, he passed his final officer's examination to be commissioned the following year as a Fregattenleutnant, or frigate lieutenant. Von Trapp had always been fascinated by submarines, and so seized the opportunity in 1908 to transfer to the newly formed submarine division of the Austro-Hungarian Navy, known as the U-Boot-Waffe. With that, he was promoted to Linienschiffsleutnant, translated as Ship of the Line Lieutenant. Austro-Hungarian subs were designated as SMU, which stood for Seine Majestäts U-Boote, translating as His Majesty's U-Boats, given that Austria-Hungary was an imperial power. The submarines were part constructed in Kiel, Germany, and Fiume and Pola in Austria-Hungary, with final build and assembly at the Whitehead Torpedo Factory in Fiume. The factory, founded by Robert Whitehead in 1874, was the world's first torpedo manufacturing factory. The factory built 2 submarines, SMU-5 and SMU-6, both of which von Trapp would eventually captain. Georg would be given command of the brand new SMU-6 in 1910. He commanded U-6 until 1913, the year before the First World War broke out. Before we dive into Georg and his World War I exploits, it's worth noting just how awful those early submarines were. They were very dangerous, to say the least. The gasoline motors vented directly into the sub, filling it with noxious, even deadly carbon monoxide fumes. Some submarines carried white mice in cages in order to assess when carbon monoxide levels got too high, much as coal miners traditionally carried canaries as warnings of high methane levels. It was so bad that there were reports of subs coming into port with just one man piloting it, and everyone else on board knocked out from monoxide poisoning. Incredibly, the early subs also had no training manuals, which meant every crew was basically alone to figure out how they worked. Navigational charts of underwater obstructions were non-existent, and so commanders had to receive orders on obstacles via relay flags. These subs were also incredibly cramped and uncomfortable, even hellish at times. At the outset of war, Georg had been stationed at Bocce di Cataro, a fjord that is today the Bay of Kotor in Montenegro, as commander of Torpedo Boat 52. His mission was to patrol the Straits of Otranto, which was a critical entry point from the Mediterranean into the Adriatic Sea. Whoever had control of this area had control of the Adriatic. It was while commanding the torpedo boat that von Trapp got the order to return to Fiume and take command of a U-boat. The U-boats of 1915 were considered the ugly stepchildren by the high command of the Austro-Hungarian Navy because they were small, plagued with technical issues, and unsafe. As such, they could only go out for very short patrols of a few days, and they certainly couldn't venture far. Obtaining funding for them had proven extremely difficult. Such were their perceived limitations and inferiority to the far more prestigious dreadnoughts that the Navy relied on. The Austro-Hungarian U-boat fleet of World War I was stationed in the Adriatic Sea with the intent of targeting Italian, French, and British vessels in the Mediterranean Sea. Although the First World War had broken out on July 28, 1914, von Trapp would only take command of his next submarine, U-5, 9 months later on April 22, 1915. Coincidentally, SM-U-5 had been christened 6 years earlier by Agatha Whitehead, the daughter of the founder of the Whitehead torpedo factory, and who was by then Georg's wife. Georg was disappointed to find that the submarines remained as limited as they had been during his training. They remained very slow underwater, and their periscopes continued to retract far too slowly. However, von Trapp was a passionate believer in submarines, and made the most of what he had, even having to make his own spare parts to replace those not available or not fit for purpose. April 27, 1915 provided von Trapp and his crew with a golden opportunity. A French armored cruiser named Léon Gambetta had been spotted in cover of darkness in order to evade detection. Von Trapp stalked the cruiser for 4 days before launching an attack using a full moon to illuminate the enemy ship. 2 torpedoes were deployed at a distance of 500 meters. Both torpedoes hit the cruiser 10 seconds apart, and within 9 minutes the ship sank to the bottom of the Mediterranean. It would be the first ever successful hit by a submarine in the Adriatic Sea. There was no other ship to assist the sinking French cruiser, and so the surviving sailors from the ship struggled in the sea. On board his submarine, Georg could fully see what was going on through his periscope, but there was nothing he could do to try and save the sailors from the French ship. His U-boat was simply too small for that. He knew that taking on extra ballast would have sunk the sub, which was already at maximum weight. Von Trapp was especially upset that no other vessel had been around to help the stricken French cruiser. While the tragedy was unraveling, he would turn to his second-in-command, Hugo von Seeferditz, and exclaim, "Our handiwork is horrible. What will we now do with these Frenchmen? Couldn't they even take along one vessel? It's unbelievable irresponsibility. How should we now help them? What a huge mess." For the sinking of Léon Gambetta, von Trapp was honored with the Austro-Hungarian Empire's Knight's Cross of the Leopold Order and the German Empire's Iron Cross, the very highest decoration in the kingdom. He was celebrated as a hero in the Austrian press, with his image printed on postcards. Youngsters even wore sailors' hats embroidered with his name. Even so, his inability to assist those drowning sailors would haunt him throughout his life. He would later write in his book, Bis zu letzten Flaggenschuss, or To the Last Salute, which was published in 1935, about what he witnessed, bitterly writing, "So this is what the war looks like. Here behind him are hundreds of drowned sailors, people who have done nothing to him, who have fulfilled their duty as he himself has, against whom he has nothing personal, with whom, on the contrary, already through their same profession, he feels himself connected." After that first sinking, von Trapp would conduct 8 more combat patrols as commander of U-5, in which he also sank the Italian submarine Naredi on August 5, 1915. Mere meters off Pelagruza Island, then known as Pelagosa Island. He also had success with the Greek steamer Cephalonia on August 29th, not sinking it, but rather capturing it and taking it as a war prize. He then conducted a further 10 patrols at the helm of SM-U-14, which had been a former French submarine named Curie, which had sunk and been salvaged by the Austro-Hungarian Navy. With this larger, faster submarine, von Trapp was able to concentrate on hunting for merchant ships. In just 6 months between April 1917 and October 1917, von Trapp and the crew of U-14 sank 11 enemy merchant ships. His first successful merchant ship sinking was a British tanker named Teakwood. What followed was the sinking by U-14 of a further 6 merchant steamers from Britain, as well as 3 steamers from Italy, and 1 steamer each from Greece and France. By May 1918, von Trapp was promoted to Korvettenkapitän, equating to lieutenant commander. He took over command of the submarine base at Cattaro in the Gulf of Kotor. That was short-lived, however, as the war ended just a few months later on November 11th, with Austria-Hungary an exhausted and defeated power, along with the German and the Ottoman empires. Georg would be acclaimed as probably the most successful and decorated submarine captain of the Austro-Hungarian Navy in World War I. He was certainly the most successful Austro-Hungarian submarine commander, having sunk 11 Allied merchant ships with a total of 47,653 GRT, as well as 2 Allied warships totaling 12,641 tons. For all his successes and decorations, Georg would often comment that the thing for which he was most proud was that not a single one of his crew died under his watch as submarine commander. At the end of the war, von Trapp was presented with the Austro-Hungarian naval flag in honor of his achievements. He was immensely proud of the flag, displaying it in his various homes for the remainder of his life. However, the end of World War I saw the collapse of the losing Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Treaty of Versailles turned Austria into a landlocked republic with no need for a navy. And so Georg von Trapp was literally out of a commission. In 1919, his home on the Adriatic coast was given to Italy, and so the von Trapps became Italian citizens. However, von Trapp would not be considered a war hero there since he had killed Italian sailors by sinking Italian merchant ships during the war, and so the von Trapp family fled to Austria. He quickly became a successful businessman, having founded the Vienna and Hamburg-based company, Vega Reederei Hamburg/Greifswald, which consisted of a fleet of that plied the North and Baltic seas. It was highly profitable. He then founded his second ship merchant enterprise, the Rhine-Donau Express Schifffahrts AG, in which he virtually captured the shipping market of the Rhine and Donau rivers. He was eventually bought out by his rivals. Georg would lose nearly all his wealth in the Great Depression, and so he and his large family became a singing troupe in order to earn money. In 1938, Hitler annexed Austria in what was known as the Anschluss, and von Trapp was offered a commission with the Kriegsmarine, or German Navy. He declined in what one could only assume was his disdain for the Nazis. The von Trapp family immigrated to the United States instead, where they would settle in Vermont and eventually find fame as the singing family, the Von Trapps. One of the most famous musicals of all time, The Sound of Music, is based on the 1949 memoir, The Story of the Trapp Family Singers, by Maria von Trapp. The film is set in Salzburg, Austria, and is a fictional retelling of her experiences as governess to 7 children, her eventual marriage with their father, Captain Georg von Trapp, and their escape during the Anschluss in 1938. Georg von Trapp was very much a Renaissance man, a man securely of that era in which military men were expected to be cultured and refined. The Naval Academy that Georg entered at age 18 had no less than 31 subjects, including German, Italian, French, English, naval tactics, naval law, meteorology, oceanography, shipbuilding, ship machine building, and ship maneuvers, to name a few. In the officer's torpedo course that Georg took in 1904, it even included a course on how to fly a hot air balloon. Cadet training also included lessons in etiquette, as well as lessons on the importance of valor and honor. Another compulsory subject that all naval cadets in Austria-Hungary had was to play a musical instrument. That's how Georg learned how to play the violin, and rather well at that. They certainly don't make naval officers like that anymore. Von Trapp would be honored in January 1995 by the Theresianische Militär Academy, the training institute for military officers of the Austrian Armed Forces. That year's graduating class of 88 graduates elected Baron Georg von Trapp as their example of an outstanding Austrian military leader, in particular for his leadership as a U-boat commander during World War I. It was a fitting tribute to a brilliant naval officer and U-boat commander, a man who also proved to be a humane gentleman. It's also worth noting that, although von Trapp was a military man through and through, he always advocated for peace over war. The story of Georg von Trapp could surely warrant a movie of its own, befitting of his fine character and incredible life. It's a life story deserving of something with a little more depth than The Sound of Music.